The Phoenician Society is delighted to welcome you all to our first Teams meeting, so welcome everybody. We are also delighted to welcome Daniele Leone and Alexandra Conti from the Phoenicians Cultural Association of Sicily and Nerea Fernandez, a student in ancient history and archaeology at the University of Edinburgh, who is also our social secretary. My name is Miriam Reis, and I'm a student in Biblical Studies at the University of Edinburgh, and I'm also the president of the Phoenician Society. The society was created this year with the cooperation of the Phoenicians Cultural Association in Sicily, and it is a great initiative for students and professors to rediscover the Phoenician heritage. I'm going to do a little presentation about who were the Phoenicians, and then I will ask the Phoenicians Cultural Association in Sicily to present their association and tell us a bit more about the Phoenicians in Sicily. Thank you. The people known to history as the Phoenicians originated in the Levant region of the eastern Mediterranean. They inhabited the coast of Lebanon, which included some coastal areas of Syria and northern Israel. Later, Phoenician civilization spread from the Levant across the Mediterranean. The Phoenicians are famed for being great traders, mariners. They're recognized as having established harbors, trading posts, and settlements throughout the Mediterranean. Some scholars claim that they reached the UK in search of tin, and it is said that the Phoenicians possibly stretched as far as the American continent way before Christopher Columbus. It is important to note that the Phoenicians were organized in city-states, the most notable of which were Beirut, the capital city of Lebanon today, Byblos, which is a city located just north of Beirut, Sidon, a city located south of Beirut, and finally Tyre, which is a city located south of Sidon. So as you can see, these cities are all located on the maritime coast of Lebanon. Phoenician identity. The question which puzzles scholars today is, what term did the Phoenicians use to identify themselves? Did they used to call themselves Phoenicians? Where did the term Phoenician come from? It is actually the Greeks who named the Phoenicians Phoenicians, and indeed, most scholars saw the term as an ancient Greek appellation, Phoenike, that most likely described a dye also known as Tyrian purple. As you can see on this map, Phoenicians founded cities not only in the Levant, but through the Mediterranean, such as in Spain, Sicily, and North Africa, like Carthage in Tunisia, for example. The city of Carthage in Tunisia was founded by Queen Elisar of Tyre, who was also called Dido or Dido, and it was well recorded in history by the Greek historian Timaeus. Phoenicians were once known for being great astronomers, mariners, merchants, architects, as well as wooden boat builders. Recently, a British sailor named Philip Beale made a replica of a 2,000-year-old Phoenician boat, and hopefully one day we will ask him to take us on a tour. In fact, 2 years ago, Philip Beale launched the Phoenicians Before Columbus expedition to demonstrate that the Phoenicians could have crossed the Atlantic Ocean long before Christopher Columbus. We mentioned the Phoenicians were merchants, and they mainly traded pottery jars, some of which held wine or olive oil, cedars, and of course the most desired Phoenician trade item was dyed Tyrian purple cloth. These great traders were mentioned in the Bible several times, notably by Ezekiel, who mentioned that Tyre was situated at the entrance of the sea, perfect in beauty, and glorious in the middle of the sea. And of course, Hiram, Phoenician king of Tyre, who appears in the Bible as a friend of Kings David and Solomon. Hiram maintained friendly relations with ancient Israel, supplying King Solomon with men and materials for the construction of the temple at Jerusalem. Purple dye. This painting is a painting by Peter Paul Rubens, which portrays Hercules' dog discovering purple dye. Indeed, the finest purple dye come from the coastal city of Tyre. Tyrian purple dye was first manufactured by the Phoenicians. According to the legend recorded by the Greek scholar Julius Pollux in the 2nd century CE, purple dye was discovered by the Phoenician god Melkart while walking along the seashore with his dog and his girlfriend called Tyros or Tyros, when suddenly the dog bit into a large sea snail and its mouth was stained purple. Tyrian purple was an expensive color because it was very difficult to make, and the source of the dye itself was the mucus produced by sea snails found in the Mediterranean Sea. Just a quick note about Melkart, whose name means king of the city in Phoenician. He was the patron god of the Phoenician city of Tyre and one of the most major gods of the Phoenician and Punic pantheons. He was also known as Baal-Sur, Lord of Tyre, and was identified with Heracles. The Phoenician alphabet. It is interesting to see, for example, the evolution of the letter A from what appears to portray a bull head to its simplified Phoenician letter called Aleph. In fact, in Arabic, like in Hebrew, the letter A is called Aleph. The Phoenicians are credited with inventing the alphabet. The Phoenician alphabet is considered to be the first alphabet and is the ancestor of most modern alphabets, including Arabic, Greek, and Latin. Their alphabet was practical for trade and it could be learned quickly by other people. Their system of writing was far simpler than Egyptian hieroglyphics and Mesopotamian cuneiform. It democratized writing, making it something that everyone could understand. The Phoenician alphabet developed from the Proto-Canaanite script. Written from right to left, their alphabet was consonantal and consisted of 22 symbols, simple enough for Phoenician traders to learn, making its use much more accessible and widespread. The earliest known inscriptions in the Phoenician alphabet come from Byblos in Lebanon and date back to 1000 BC. Fully developed Phoenician script can be seen engraved on the sarcophagus of King Ahiram in Byblos, one of the 5 known Biblian royal inscriptions. According to Herodotus, who was a Greek historian, Cadmus introduced the Phoenician alphabet to the Greeks, who later adapted it to form their Greek alphabet. Cadmus was the son of Agenor, king of Tyre. He was the founder and first king of the city Thebes in Greece, and he was the brother of Queen Europe, who gave her name to the continent of Europe. I shall now welcome the Phoenicians Cultural Association in Sicily to tell us more about the Phoenicians in Sicily and their association.
Hello. On behalf of the Phoenicians Cultural Association, we want to thank Miriam Reis, Nerea Fernandez from the Phoenician Society of the University of Edinburgh, and Professor Juan Luis. I'm very happy to be here with you. My name is Alessandra Conti. I'm the president of the Phoenicians Cultural Association, and I founded this association in 2015 together with the vice president Daniele Leone. Inside the association we have also a Phoenician name from the Phoenician alphabet. For example, Aleph for Alessandra and Daleth for Daniele. The Phoenicians aims to research, study and communicate the everyday life of the ancient people who inhabited the Mediterranean area. Inside our association we have the Archeocuisine project concerning the recreation of ancient food, recipes, utensils and consumption habits. We have also the Phoenicians Historical Reenactment Group, which is the only historical group focused on the Phoenician, Punic and Greek period in Sicily. In our logo we have two of the Biblos figurines, ex voto, votive gifts, found in ancient Phoenician temples in Lebanon, dating back to the 2nd millennium BC. And there is also a Roman transport amphora for the oil storage, a Dressel 20. In the middle of the amphora, the Panis Pompeii, one of the carbonized bread loaves found in the ruins of Pompeii. And now our Vice President, Daniele Leone, coordinating with the Phoenician Society, will illustrate our association and the Phoenicians in Sicily. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. I'm Daniele Leone. I'm the Vice President of the Phoenicians Cultural Association. So the Phoenicians Cultural Association was created in order to enhance awareness of the Phoenician heritage. It aims to rediscover, promote, and encourage the study and familiarization with the cultural, gastronomical, social, and religious life of the Phoenicians and the other civilization who in ancient times inhabit the Mediterranean area, from the Near Orient to the shores of the Atlantic. Our focus is on the Sicily of the Greco-Phoenician Punic periods, ancient gastronomy and experimental archaeology, ancient clothing that we use for the reenactment, and also the ancient values and then the religion and rituality. The Phoenicians in Sicily. The first inhabitants were the Sicans, hence the name of the island in Sicania. And then the Elymians and the Sicels follow later, and the Greeks changed the name into Sicelia. The Sicanians, the native people of Sicily, inhabit the interior, the Sicels the east, the Elymians the northwest. And then the Phoenicians arrived to Sicily to trade with all these people and eventually founded trading posts, emporia, all around the Sicilian coast, making alliances especially with the Elymians. At that time, these culturally and racially diverse people lived in comparative harmony in the respective areas of the island. When the Greeks arrived in Sicily during the 8th century BC and established their settlements, the Phoenicians left the east coast and moved to the west, keeping their influence on the west and northwest area of the island. They founded settlements like Mozia, Palermo, Solunto. According to archaeological evidences, Mozia was founded in the 8th century BC, while Solunto and Palermo before the mid or late 7th century BC. During the 6th, 5th century BC, Carthage, the former Tyrian settlement in northern Africa, took over the Sicilian Phoenician settlements and the balance was broken. The Carthaginians, also known by the Latins as Poeni, meaning Punics, with their aggressive mind, wanted to take the control of the whole island. So in 480 BC, at Himera, on the northern shores of the Tyrrhenian Sea, the Carthaginians and the Sicilian Greeks, the Siceliotes, fought over the control of the island, and the Greeks won. Then small and big battles were fought between the Punics and the Greeks for over 2 centuries, until the Romans came and took over the whole island. And here the ethnic map of the settlements in western Sicily from the 8th century BC to the 4th century BC about. You can see in the middle of the map, the black dots are the Sicanian settlements. The purple squares are the Phoenician Punic settlements. The yellow squares are the Elymian settlements, and the blue dots are the Greek settlements. The blue squares next to the black dots indicate that these are Sicanian indigenous sites that eventually became Hellenized. The purple square next to the black dots are the settlements that fell under the sphere of influence of the Phoenicians and Punics. So starting from Selinunte, going up to the north, Selinunte was right on the border between Carthaginian and Greek territories, and where Greek and Phoenician Punics were trade partners and also shared some cults. Phoenicians were not just merchants, but also needed to cultivate land, and here in the valley of the Eleutherion and the San Leonardo rivers, they founded agricultural settlements to supply the biggest settlements. Therefore, the Phoenicians were not only on the coast, but also inland, next to the rivers, which were the highways of antiquity. And now we begin with the Phoenician Punic settlements in Sicily. We start from the most representative one, Mozia, in Phoenician Mutwa, meaning a wool spinning center, perhaps related to the Textile Industries Institute on the island. It was the most important Phoenician Punic town in western Sicily, with a population perhaps up to 10,000 people. So you have to imagine this island completely covered with buildings, with a large industrial quarter, and during the Punic times it was surrounded by 2.5 kilometers of city wall. A main road connected Porta Nord, North Gate, to Porta Sud, South Gate. Then another road connected Porta Nord to the mainland. Today this road is underwater. On the south side of the island, near Porta Sud, there is an artificial pool called the Cothon. This is a rectangular basin of about 50 by 40 meters with a flat bottom excavated in the rock. And next to it, there are two sanctuaries dedicated to Ashtart and Baal. So probably the Cothon had a religious function. Perhaps it was a sacred pool used for religious rituals. You can see in the slide the youth of Mozia, dating back from the mid-5th century BC, made on Parian marble. It was uncovered on the island of Mozia in 1979 by archaeologist Gioacchino Falsone from the University of Palermo under a mound of debris created as a barricade during the siege of 397 BC by the tyrant of Syracuse, Dionisio I. Here, the limestone stele in many shapes, some of them with dedicatory inscription from the archaic Tophet, where urns containing the cremated bones of infants and animals were buried. And now Lilybaeum, Lilib, today's Marsala. Lilib, meaning that looks to Libya, that's because Africa, North Africa, was known by the Phoenicians and Greeks as Libya, was founded by the Carthaginians to give a new homeland to refugees from the nearby Mutwa, Mozia, which had been destroyed in 397 BC by the Syracusan tyrant Dionisio I. Lilib was to replace Mutwa as a defensive pivot of the Punic province of Sicily and as a starting point for reaching Carthage from Sicily. In the Marsala waters, they found a Carthaginian cargo ship and a warship, perhaps used during the Battle of the Egades, which was a naval battle fought in 241 BC between the fleets of Carthage and Rome during the First Punic War. Here you can see 3 of the 13 rostra, battling rams, that were retrieved from the bottom of the sea, and one of them has an inscription to Baal. You also can see a funerary niche with the symbol of Tanit and a banquet scene, which shows the correlation between food, religion, and the underworld. In fact, food for us is very important to understand the life of the ancient people and their traditions. And now Palermo, Ziz, meaning blossom. Unfortunately, not much remains of the Phoenician Punic times due to the fact that the city was built on top of it during the following periods. But from the map, you can see the ancient Ziz, which was a peninsula in between two rivers, the Chemonia and the Papireto, or what is called the Phoenician Foot. Here you can see some of the ceramics and amphoras from the grave goods of the Punic necropolis of Palermo and some of the Punic fortifications outside the Norman Palace, the Sicilian parliament since the Middle Ages. Sicily, in fact, has its own parliament and regional laws next to the Italian one. Many of these tombs are carved chamber tombs with a dromos, or a passageway into an ancient subterranean tomb, that housed the sarcophagus, where the person objects of the deceased were placed. The types of burial were different: simple burials, or a simple pits or wells for cinerary urns dug into the earth, sarcophagi, dug out of limestone and covered with terracotta tiles or a slab. The burials were mainly for inhumations, but there are also for incinerations. Solunto, Kfr, meaning village. Initially, this Phoenician settlement was built on the shoreline. Then, during the same expedition led by the tyrant of Syracuse, Dionysius I, which destroyed Mozia in 397 BC, in 396 BC destroyed Kfr. Eventually, the town was rebuilt on top of the slope of the mountain. Here you can see some examples of the homes built during the Hellenistic times in Greek style. So we have a Greek theater, but we can also see that it was a Phoenician Punic site from the religious place, like this sacrificial altar with 3 battles and the tub for the collection of the animal blood. This is an example of how Phoenician Punics enjoyed the Greek lifestyle, but at the same time preserve the cultural traits. Pizzocannita. Pizzocannita is in the Eleutherian River Valley, is an area that was very important for agriculture. So it's a site consisting in a settlement founded for agricultural purposes. And it has a cave inside the peak, and it was probably used for rituals. Near Pizzocannita, they found 2 Phoenician anthropomorphic sarcophagi dating back to the 6th-5th century BC. These sarcophages are very similar to the ones found in Gadir, to the Cadiz in Spain, Carthage, and in the motherland Phoenicia. Selinunte. Then going back to Selinunte, this is a site where syncretism, meaning blending together different religious elements and deities, is visible in the cult of Demetra, Malophoros, and Zeus Melichios. Here, the altar with the battles, an iconic representation of the deities, typical of the Phoenician religion. The worship of Tanit was concurrent with the worship of Demetra and Persephone. The sanctuary of Demetra, Malophoros, and Zeus Melichio, next to the Zeus Melichio worshipping area, was originally built by the Greeks in the 650 BC for the worship of Demetra and Persephone, but it was then refurbished as a Carthaginian temple once they took over in 409 BC. The artifacts discovered at Malophoros demonstrate a syncretic adaptation of worship of both Demetra and Tanit, and the worshippers were primarily women. You can see here, right in front of Temple C, inside the Acropolis, a mosaic with Tanit in a house. That was a symbol of welcome and good health, and it dates back to the 409 BC, when the Punic people arrived and occupied the Acropolis of Selinunte. So now you can see our day-to-day activities. The way basically we study the ancient life is by teaching labs, tasting, theme visit, cultural itineraries, educational trips, reenactments, events. We do that through cultural projects geared to recapturing the everyday of the life of antiquity. Here we have some example of teaching in labs and events. Our archaeologist in typical ancient clothing is illustrating to a group of students about a Punic cuisine. We have the ceramics. He's showing the bread that we have made with the symbol of Tanit. Here you can also see the little hand, which today people call it the Fatima hand, the cereals, grains used during those times, some dry meat, and also a metal plate used to make stamp the symbols on top of the bread. On the left, you can see a prehistoric fire that was done during a prehistoric event. Our associate member, psychologist, was very interested in this method because he considered it to be a good way for people to socialize, and it was very relaxing. We actually had to teach people how to eat without using the utensils, so no forks, no plates, no napkins, just the use of a stick and a piece of meat and their hands. So that was a very fascinating way to entertain people. We also give great importance to conferences and meetings. The first one on the bottom right was very important because it was the debut of our cultural association. The gentleman on the right was the sponsor of the event, and he's also the producer of ancient grains, which he donated to the event and eventually to the dinner. On top of it, we have our archaeologists illustrating ancient breads during the Greek times. And on the left, another archaeologist together with the psychologist talking about the Greek habits in wine and food habits during the Greek times in Sicily. And here are some of the archaeocuisine testings. The first picture is to illustrate that we like to use fresh products, possibly local. On the left, our associate is working on a Greek banquet. And on the right, we have a Phoenician dish, which we made with the murex. So we use the snail of the murex, we use the burgul, chickpeas, and also we use the famous ancient condiment, also called the garum. Here is, for example, we visited the archaeological site near Palermo in a natural reservation area called San Vito Lo Capo, where there are remainings of garum factory. For example, here I'm holding the salt, and which was the main ingredient, together with herbs, fish and fish guts, and that's how garum was made. Garum was a popular fish sauce condiment, and it was made by cutting fish and left to ferment for a while. The fish used for the garum were tuna, anchovies, mackerels, and other types of fishes. And since the production of garum created such an unpleasant smell, the factories were placed outside of the cities. Here are some of the educational trips that we do with our associates members. The first one was in the island of Crete. We are visiting a Minoan archaeological site, Arphistos. Then we also do local trekkings, which are usually open to everyone. And this is a specific trekking in a prehistoric site. And you can see here the cave, the grotta of the prehistoric times. We are a select group of people devoted to the study of antiquity, a commitment which we take the most seriously in terms of reliving and re-exhuming the values of the past. Our teams includes archaeologists, tour guides, environmental guides, anthropologists, scholars, students, and just passionate people in general. So everyone is really welcome to join us as long as you share the same passion and the same values. Our goals is to contribute to the creation of a cultural community in which to achieve and share today, as in the past, knowledge, informations, and ideas. To communicate culture, we consider ourselves cultural communicators at the service of both academics and passionate people or tourists to help everyone to understand the wonders of the ancient world. And this is how we communicate. We communicate through emotions. So as I said, we consider ourselves culture communicators. And the way we do is through emotion and by involving people through stimulation sensory, for example, during our guided tours with the reenactment. Our recent activities and future projects. We are working on the reconstruction of a prehistoric garden in collaboration with the municipality of Palma di Montechiaro here in Agrigento. Also in partnership with a company that is developing video games. We're making a European strategic cultural video game concerning the Phoenicians. We're also working on the reconstruction of an archaic musical instrument called the Formings in collaboration with Dr. Angela Bellia of the Archaeological Institute of America and chair of the Archaeomusicology Interest Group. Also, jointly with Inge Bösken-Kanold, German lady who studied at the University of Beirut, the American University of Beirut, and lived in Lebanon for many years, we will do an event concerning the purple dye. Here, one of the projects that we're working is a cultural video game in partnership with the European Council and the partners. We took a part of a photo shooting for this cultural video game because this is a new approach to teach history. Since video games are set in historical times, kids can learn many historical facts and details by playing. Here, for example, one of the pictures of the shooting shows the method of reconstruction of the clothes. Here, our sacred, highest sacred priest, for example, she took the inspiration from a statuette discovered in Puig des Molins tombs in Ibiza, and that shows also how we create our clothing. Also, the local newspapers, Giornale di Sicilia, one of the main newspapers in Sicily, is talking about our strategic cultural video game. So, the purple dye, this is one of the events that hopefully we will do this summer. We want to show some pieces of purple dye. You can see the different variations in terms of colors, which goes from bright yellow to a very deep dark purple. And some of this purple was donated to us by Inge Bosche. She was very, very kind to donate the purple, some of the purple cloth to us because you have to understand that it's very expensive. It costs about 10 euros per gram. So we really appreciate her contribution. And for that reason, she became the honorary member of our cultural association. We will do the 3rd of July, we will do this reenactment and we will talk about the purple dye. So what can we do together? Well, we have thought about a joint project, in this case, Food in the Bible is one of the creations that we recently experimented. And you can see here our work method. So first, we look for literary sources. So we read, for example, here in the Bible, the figs are one of the biblical 7 species. Fig cakes are mentioned in the Bible, for example, in the first verse of Samuel. Then we look for archaeological evidences. Here, for example, you can see some figs found in the Jordan Valley, discovered from an early Neolithic period site in Gezer. Then finally, we compare these results with the current culinary traditions. Here, the devela from Israel, for example, and the Spanish pan de higos from Spain, which is perhaps a tradition that was brought by the Jews, the Sephardic Jews, to Spain. You can see our creation, our experimental creation on the left, round square-shaped press cakes. When we made our version of devela, as a result, we find out that it not only tasted much sweeter, but by compressing it, we understood that it took a large number of figs into a very small single cake. In fact, you have to understand that these figs were stored as a major source of food during the winter times. And perhaps it needed to be also stored for the long journey of the Phoenicians. And so we wanted to conclude this presentation in the archaeological site of Selinunte, in the Acropolis, right in front of the Temple Sea, a Greek woman and a Punic man representing the intercultural dialogue. And we hope to see you soon in Sicily, where we will show you all these beautiful places. Thank you.
Thank you all for attending this meeting. We are planning much more meetings about the Phoenicians. A special thank you for Professor Juan Luis, who also attended the meeting and who is one of our professors who is encouraging us with our studies in this field. So see you all again and stay tuned.